So welcome everyone to the How to Define and Create a CTO Job Spec. I'm not Abbi Leverton, but for today's purposes, I'll just pretend I am. My name's Marty and I'm the Community Manager for the London CTOs. I work with Barry Cranford, who's the founder of London CTOs. And for those of you who don't know, London CTOs is just one of the communities that's run by RecWorks, which is a tech recruitment company with a difference. So we believe that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry. I know recruitment sometimes gets a bad rap, a little bit like car salespeople, and I've worked in recruitment myself, so I kind of get it. But we sort of want to be a little bit different and be sort of beyond just placing people in jobs. And we want to really have a focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development. So we sort of see this as giving back to those people that we've worked with in the past, but also we want to pay it forward to those we hope to work with in the future as well. We've run over 700 events, which is amazing, for engineers, developers, students, graduates, CTOs, and in January this year, we made our 400th introduction. I think that is, I don't think it's 4,000, through our Meet a Mentor program. I could be wrong. So if you'd like to know more about our communities, all the different communities that we run, please feel free to drop me a message. I am going to share my LinkedIn profile over in the chat. And I can give you more information if you'd like to find out more about Meet a Mentors or any of our other communities. So, as this is a roundtable event, please feel free to ask any questions. We do have some special guests that are going to be chatting and kicking everything off. But please feel free to ask any questions, get involved in the conversation, because that's what we're here for. There's no need to wait till the end and ask a question in the chat. Just jump right in and get involved. And yeah, there's literally no rules. So you're not here to listen to me jabbering on all day. So I'm going to hand over to our speakers to introduce themselves. And yeah, Mark, will we start with you?
Cool, thanks. I'm Mark Burnett. I am the Chief Commercial Officer for a vehicle data company called Disk Drive. We specialize in vehicle specification data. I've also started several startups. I started when I was 19 with my first startup. And I've done a lot of recruiting. I've recruited some CTOs, so I look forward to hearing your questions and getting to know all of you.
Gaby, do you want to go next? And just
yeah, sure, I can. So I'm CEO of Future Ratio. So we specialize in helping large corporates, medium-sized corporates and startups with their business and brand strategy. We get them ready for funding. For large corporates, we get them ready to reposition, help them with acquisition strategy, their reorientation, their growth plans, etc. So my particular interest in terms of CTOs and helping organizations grow or develop is comes from a number of projects I've carried out. And sometimes there is a mismatch between what a CTO does or can do within the strategy that is defined or maybe somewhat ill-defined, not defined yet. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, thanks, Gaby. I'm ZeShaan, he, him. So I've got 15 years working in the people/HR space, all in digital and tech. Started my career working in a tech recruitment agency. Then moved, after about 4 years, moved in-house as a tech recruiter in the public service at the BBC. By the time I left there, I was in charge of all digital and tech recruitment across all the BBC's UK sites. I then moved into the only place more bureaucratic than the BBC, and that's the British government, where I helped transform how government digital service did tech recruitment and helped a number of government departments teach themselves how to fish, if you will. I then joined a tech startup scale-up called Onfido at Series B, scaled them from 50 people to 250 people across 7 global sites. And then more recently joined the People Collective, where we help tech startups and scale-ups avoid what we call people debt. by setting up things such as progression frameworks, compensation philosophy, manager development programs, how to plan and allocate equity, interview training, etc. All the things that I wish we had access to when I first joined a startup, and throughout that whole journey have helped. I clarified the requirements for what the technology or the CTO leaders were, and basically recruited them as well. So hopefully can bring some insight to the table and also learn from you as well.
Brilliant. Stuart, do you want to just do a brief introduction?
Hi. Yeah, sure. So my name's Stuart Prestedge. I've been a founder and CTO for almost 35 years now of various of my own startups. I know, sorry, Mark, I picked you to the post. 18 was my first startup. Yeah, so I've been doing that a while, a number of exits as well. And about 5 years ago, I decided I will start helping other people. So I started advising, mentoring, and now I'm just starting to do coaching and training as well. So I've got a number of hats. You know, I've got a small product, which I released last week, you know, just because I haven't had one for a while. And I've got a software development company, but I spend a lot of my time talking to other people, helping them, anything from getting the concept off the ground to preparing for exit. So that's me.
Brilliant. We've got a wealth of knowledge in this little group, haven't we? So I was just going to kick off the conversation in regards to something that Mark and I were talking about last week that really interested me. We were having a conversation in regards to making sure that your company values align with possible candidates, and being able to create like a collaborative atmosphere rather than conflict. Mark, did you want to talk a little bit about that, like kick the conversation off with that, and maybe just talk a little bit about the surveys that you do, because I found that really interesting.
Okay, so I want to clarify there is a difference between hiring someone as an employee and choosing someone as a partner who you're going to work with and build a company with. If you're looking for someone who you are going to build a company with, you're probably going to be working with them for 10 or 15 years. And I think it's very important that we align on things where make sure our values are the same and how we're going to react to different scenarios. So if you have a scenario, one of the, you know, I do this survey when I want to partner up with someone, where I ask questions like, what do you see happening in 10 to 15 years? If we get an acquisition offer, would you take the acquisition offer? Would you keep building it? Would you prioritize money over, you know, the environment? Or would you choose one scenario versus another scenario in certain, when you choose something that's important to you? So one of the things that did actually come up with us was with AWS, some of their data centers are carbon neutral, but they're more expensive. So what do you choose in that scenario? And being aligned on things like that is important to me. I also find it's important to want to go for a drink with these people. The best ideas are on the back of napkins. And so if you are limiting yourself to only chatting with them in a boardroom, you might not get the same results as if you hang out with them outside of it, and knowing that you're going to actually get along with this person is just as important. So I ask questions that are important to me, but ask questions that are important to you. If it's an employee, it doesn't actually make that much of a difference, because there is going to be a situation where there is a power dynamic, and you can't put yourself in a situation where that power dynamic limits your choice of someone. You can't discriminate. I definitely don't think anyone should ever discriminate. But if they're not going to be the decision maker, then be a little bit kinder to them and be a little bit more open to their answers. So that's why I just want to clarify the difference between having someone as a partner and wanting to actually get along with them.
But why would you set a different standard, especially if it's a small early stage company? Like, I mean, I would say some of the worst disasters I've seen have been first 10 employees who that kind of diligence wasn't done. And so they've become toxic, or they've become, they dragged the company in different directions, it caused huge amounts of harm.
So the most important thing is that I was actually listening to some speakers who worked at Y Combinator, and they were talking about share equity and splitting equity. If someone who is your CTO and you haven't got an MVP yet, you need to share your equity with them and be as close to 50-50 as possible. When it's an early hire and it's a small amount of equity, there's that power dynamic, and you've got to limit the detrimental effects of choosing someone based on their opinions. And also when you're hiring an employee, it's not as important to think of a 15-year plan. Even if you want them to be there for 15 years, if you give them a few percent, they're not necessarily going to be there. And if you don't get along, then you're probably going to part ways, whereas you're not going to part ways with a CTO or a partner who is sharing your company almost 50-50. That answer?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because you're talking about longevity, and Adam is talking about, whether you are a partner or you're an employee, you can actually, if you are clear about what your vision is, what your essence is as a brand, as a business, where you're going to go, you might find that employee that you hire early on actually will carry you there and will help you get there. And so if you engage them in your culture, and they share your culture, they share your values, they share how you do things, how you achieve things, how you work together, how you innovate together, how you tackle those big challenges that you will have. An employee, in terms of how they can help you achieve that vision, can be just as important. I think if you look at giving away some of your equity, obviously you want to be able to know that person who you give 8% to versus 1.5% to delivers a key critical role and the deliverables that you're expecting jointly. But in terms of aligning the employee journey, they also have to decide whether we as the employer are good enough, embracing enough, innovative enough, exciting enough to stay. So I think that kind of goes both ways. And the way that I think you can kind of glue that together is like, if you have an essence that is really relevant to all parties and really solves a real problem in the marketplace, and it's not just a tech idea for the sake of it, or another idea for the sake of it, or yet another clothing brand for the sake of it. If you have a real essence and you solve a real problem in the marketplace, then aligning the right people with you, whether they're your employee, your partner, or your collaborator, I think that's something that's often forgotten, or your collaborator, can really help get you there. And I think the investment in anyone who shares your journey is one that we should really, really look at, and we should really interrogate ourselves. So I kind of agree with Adam that, the employee is an incredibly important part to that journey.
Absolutely. There's always, the early employees particularly are very important to the journey, but it's also important to have different viewpoints on some things, and it's easier to have a different viewpoint with an employee who has 1.5% than someone who you're going to be sitting around a table with after hours working on new ideas. Also, these things aren't necessarily about I've split it into sections. So the one section is how you see the company growing over time, and whether you're going to seek venture capital. Those kinds of questions are very different to the section that I ask about what are your views on various social issues. And so having an aligned vision on one thing can be important to an employee, and having a certain view on another thing can be important to a partner. Also, I do want to say there's no right or wrong answers in these surveys I do. It's very much to stimulate conversation. I want to get to know you. These questions I ask are to get to know you. I don't want to, I don't really care who your political role models are. I really don't. I just want to stimulate a conversation and get to know you and get to know how you feel about things and where your priorities lie and what are the hills you'll die on. So, Gaby, I think you're making a bit of a face, but
no, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Is that on paper you get so much insight about potential, collaborators, whether they're partners or employees. In an interview, you get another sense of who they are. But I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to dig deep into the psychology, into what makes them tick, whether they would, how they might work, what their challenges are, how they can help you with yours, etc. I think that is a very good thing. Don't get me wrong. I think that is I think that is great. But I think the point I'm making is that would apply to the person who I collaborate with. I'd like to know that. And also the person who I recruit as my CMO or my CTO or my COO, because as you go on your journey, especially as a startup, what you start with is not necessarily what you end up with at year 5, 6, 10, whatever. It's the agility with that. And I agree with you. If it's a little bit like marrying somebody or being with somebody, you do your due diligence. And I think you're right. If you want to partner up with somebody who knows more about something than you do, like the CTO in this case, would know more hopefully than you do in their area of expertise, then I think it is important to understand, what they might be like more as a person, not just on paper and on a 1 or 2 dimensional level. So I wasn't making a face. I was agreeing with you.
Okay.
Mark, I just want to add, I agree with you on the partner side of things, definitely. But I believe that you missed out how people work under stress as well, under pressure. And I couldn't agree more about the meeting with someone that you're going to partner with, if that's possible, obviously. But it's that your personality, you've got to look at your personality and their personality, and how they'll fit together. No, not just their personality. So it's how you work together and under stress. And if you can simulate that somehow or find out about that, then that's key, because there is a lot of stress, as you know.
Yeah, I share my answers with them as well. I do the exact same questions and I send them because they might not want to partner with me. But it actually brings to mind that dating site that existed long ago. I don't know if it still exists, OkCupid. And it asks these questions and it scores you on how compatible you are. But whenever I was on it, I found that the people I was most compatible with, I didn't get along with.
That's AI for you. And the other thing, of course, is, we're talking about job specs, and obviously the contracts come after that. But what's really, really important, I guess we all know this, but not everybody knows this, is to have an agreement, partnership agreement. And I still see people who don't have that. So, just want to throw that in there. And so you agree verbally and then put it in writing, what responsibilities are, what happens under certain circumstances, etc.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I agree wholeheartedly, Mark, with what you're saying in terms of kind of proactive conversation and get to know people. And for me, it all boils down to inclusivity, right? So you're inclusive of other people's perspectives, their backgrounds, understanding their values, their morals, their drivers, and as Stuart said, how they react under stress is a huge one, right? But then also one thing that I would disagree with what you said on, Mark, if I've understood correctly, is that whose perspective that you add or take the heaviest weight, the 8.5% or the 1.5. Actually, it's being inclusive of those diverse perspectives. So I wouldn't necessarily weigh up one person's perspective more than the other, just because of the level of seniority or expertise, the reason why you've hired that person, whether they're an employee, a partner, even a mentor, or just somebody as a sounding board, is because you want to be inclusive of that different perspective. And so it's not a waiting of, it's you bring that in. So it's not, you talk about the power dynamic as well. And I think that's a really, it's a touchy place to get into, where you're in your mind's eye putting hierarchy of perspective in terms of whose opinions you consider more or less. Actually, that's when it comes into kind of being clear about who decision makers are, or who the person is accountable for a particular thing. The CTO, yes, is going to be accountable for X, Y, and Z. The CMO for A, B, and C. But that doesn't mean that the person who is just an employee doesn't have an opinion or a perspective that can add real depth to the conversation as well, and help you make that informed decision. Especially, you know, in startups, there's ambiguity, there's things need to happen at speed and at scale and under stress as well. So again, that's the only thing I'd respectfully disagree about.
Yeah, I think that I brought up power dynamics because it can be a little bit difficult when you're going down the line and you've got a product and you're building up a team, and you are building up these structures of, you know, these managerial structures of who is responsible for X and who reports to. So I'm not talking about, you know, weighting it depending on who owns what percentage. I'm weighting it, or I'm thinking about it as you need those other perspectives. You do need those other perspectives. But just my personal opinion, I think it helps to have those different perspectives in different positions within the company. And it comes down to who your partners are and who you're sitting around having a drink with when you're on your 500th employee is very different to who you're sitting down with in a board meeting. So I think that's kind of where I was coming from with that. I definitely believe that there should be different perspectives within a company. Like I say, I don't really care what your answers are. I just wanted to emphasize that if someone's that I'm going to be working with for a very long time, and we are going to be going out for drinks after work in order to brainstorm, you need to think about that.
But then I would challenge that as well, because then those are cabals that you're creating. And actually, if that person, for whatever reason, you know, they're a subject matter expert and they bring perspective to the table, but you don't want to have a drink with them, means that when you're actually going to do those decision-making things in the pub or in the bar, they're not going to be included because you don't necessarily want to hang out with them, right? So then you're creating that cabal, and then you're actually not being inclusive to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's not what I was saying at all. It's not that I don't want to have a drink with it. It's just the way that you know, if you're sitting with 50 employees, it's very different. If this is your first hire, then it's different to if it's your 500th hire. And it's not about not wanting to have a drink with them. It's just what's actually going to happen as you build the company. You know, when you do have a company with a large number of employees, it's very different. And it also depends whether this is a C-level person or, you know, a junior person. It really makes a big difference. It's getting into the nitty-gritty of that. I don't work with anyone I don't want to have a drink with. Not because if it's not because of perspectives or anything, but because the only people I don't want to have a drink with are people who are really not worth having in your organization. I think that another thing that Marty and I talked with is a talk that was done by Simon Sinek. And it talked about trust versus performance. And you need to trust someone. It's more important to trust someone than to have them performing in to be the top performer. When I say someone I don't want to have a drink with, it's a case of I don't trust this person. That's why I don't want to have a drink with them. And I don't want to have people that I don't trust in my organization at all.
Can I just, sorry, I just going to add to what you're saying there, Mark. So what, you know, when the decision maker is clear, when it's clear who the decision maker is, and that person has experience and is a reasonable person, you know, naturally they will listen to the appropriate people, involve the appropriate people in the sort of information gathering stage and opinion stage, and then make the decision. There are two sort of possible gotchas there. You know, one is obviously if you've got 50-50 split on your partnership, or, you know, third or whatever. This is why I mentioned the partnership agreement, because, you know, you have to know what to do when you disagree on something. Who is the decision maker in a particular realm? Historically, I've done it. You know, I make the technical decisions if it you know comes to a disagreement, and my partners make the business decisions. But the other gotcha there, and maybe this comes down to your point on trust and people you want to work with, you know, the culture of the company and the people you employ. But yes, you will involve people in making decisions where appropriate. And it gets harder as you get larger, of course, because you can't involve everyone in every decision. But I think then there has to be a clear cutoff. Okay, I've got all the information, I've got your opinion, and I'm listening to it. And it's not based on equity, it's based on the situation. And then you have to make the decision. But, you know, you have to be clear on, okay, I'm making a decision now. We're not going to keep discussing this. And it's just about clear boundaries and clear communication.
And on that, yeah, on that, Stuart, it's about, yeah, that you don't have to explain every decision you make and why you made that decision, but that's where the trust and the psychological safety happens. Say, for example, hey, I know that this is happening in X, Y, and Z environment. This is the decision maker. This is who they've involved, rather than just for extremist sake, Mark, you know, person A and person B have gone for a piss up. I don't drink, so I'm not there at that table. So that's where the decision's being made. And that's where that psychological safety and that trust kind of maybe falls down. And it's just about being clear about that with the team, to be like, here's the expectations, and here, as Stuart's saying, here's how decisions are being made, rather than just having conflabs all the time about let's just listen and do things democratically as well. But just on Adam's point, what he said about if you don't have to have a CTO yet, then don't get one. Most pre-MVP startups aren't ready for a CTO. They just need a really solid, agile, adaptive lead engineer. That's one of the things I see often, where people are like, hey, people overinflate the title. So they either have a founder who is at a certain level and they just give them the CTO title, or they hire their first engineer and make them VP of Eng or CTO. And then you've got nowhere to go with that person as well. So again, making sure that you don't overinflate titles, be clear about what you're looking for. And this is what I speak to Barry about a lot. As a recruiter, when I first have the conversation with the hiring manager, I would ask questions like, why is there a need? What would happen without this hire? Essentially, what's broken that needs fixing that we can't, and what have we done internally to try and fix this as well, right? So again, just understanding the problem space, and then clearly in one line, what's this person's mission? What's it to do? You know, I've seen it happen so many times where people are like, oh, you know, we want to fast track and we want to get to a super, you know, big tech company as well. Let's get a VP of Eng from a Facebook or a Google. And then they come to the startup with a fraction of the resources, fraction of the engineers, and you're expecting them to fast track you 2 or 3 stages in your development as well. And then it doesn't work out. And I think there's a misalignment in terms of what the problem you're trying to solve is for today and for tomorrow, and what that solution looks like. So many founders often get blinded by the names and the lights on people's CVs without actually clearly identifying and articulate what they need to solve and finding the right person for that. As Adam said, it might be a really solid engineer, lead engineer, for example, rather than a CTO or a VP Eng or whatever it might be.
But just can I add to that? The word solid is very ambiguous, because, you know, even an early stage startup needs to think about things that are not just writing software, you know, security and legals and compliance and scalability and all this stuff that even good developers sometimes just don't want to have anything to do with. So that solid is a very weighted term, Adam. So hopefully you include, those kind of things that are, necessary, but not necessarily part of writing software in that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Again, a solid, good point. Just a solid engineer means different things to different people, right?
Yeah, quite.
And that's about the proactive communication. I think Mark was talking about to start with. Actually, stop making the assumption about what the other person is. Ask the question: what do you think about X? What do you think about Y? And actually, well, the engineering is a whole plethora of different things. But some are necessity. Documentation, but I'm an engineer who loves documenting their work versus the other kind of more creative part. But you find some variances. People are diverse, and that's the fun of it as well. And then also, again, back to wrapping it around about articulating the problem that you're looking for, and then the clarity of the decision maker. How will that person, that CTO or whatever you're looking for, what are their responsibilities going to be in your mind's eye? 80% engineering, 20% people management, or whatever it might be. And then how will they contribute towards your company's goals, whether it's revenue, increasing gross margin, NPS, whatever. Having that cleared out, as well as saying, we've got this person, what does 30, 60, 90 days look like? What are they delivered by 30 days? What they've done by 60? What they've done by 90? And then you've got a probation period as well, right? All of that's done in the first conversation with founders or with leaders, whoever, to articulate each role, not just CTO, any role. And then once you've done that, that's when you can start to say, okay, well, what's the selection criteria? What's the interview process? Why would somebody leave their job to do it? And that's when you're building out what I call a campaign plan. So that's the starting point. And when I was at Onfido, one of the founders, Rahul, was the CTO, and he came to me one day with the other founders, and he said, look, I'm stepping away from being CTO at a certain point. I'm going to become the chief architect. And I was just like, why are you I basically have to find another CTO. So obviously it's a lot of work for me to do. I'm just like, why? Is something broken? He's like, the CTO, the role of the CTO changes as the company scales and grows, right? So what got you there isn't necessarily what's going to get you to where you need to get to. So he was just like, early stage, I'm happy to be that role. He goes, I don't want to do any of the rest of the stuff, this process scalability, the people management, those other elements of the CTO role. He goes, I just want to be a hands-on engineer. I just want to break and fix stuff and play around with the architecture and whatnot as well. So I think that was an important light bulb moment for me as well, to saying actually sometimes people get on and get off at certain points of the journey, and that's the same with the CTO or any engineering leaders as well. So some different roles or different the in your mind's eye, the dreams that you want to get to, hire them early, you can actually kind of scale to get there bit by bit.
Jim, how strategic do you think most CTOs are? Because in my experience, there is a gap to be closed between what a CTO is on paper, what they are in reality, and how they actually, from a customer-centric point of view, deliver what is required. And we can, if all of us put our heads together, we can find a million cases of where things don't work. Whether that's product, service, whatever, everything around us that brands touch. How strategic do you think a CTO is in reality, versus how strategic they should be?
Are you asking, Gaby? Sorry.
Or anyone, but particularly ZeShaan, because you were talking about the CTO actually who by heart is an engineer, but went into the CTO role, then decided that's not kind of for me. So if you're a strategic business builder, a strategic problem solver, you probably wouldn't have been that engineer. You probably wouldn't have been made CTO. You probably wouldn't have gone for that job if you know yourself how you want to contribute to the growth or an acquisition, whatever it is. And so the question is around how strategic is a CTO, or should a CTO be, and how important therefore is it for them to be involved in the overall corporate development. Because if you're clear about who you are, where you want to go as a business, so Mark, you're the CEO, you're crystal clear about what you want to do, where you want to go and how you're going to go and get there, then the hire should be an easier task, because you engage, you engage them in that. So my question is, how strategic really are a lot of CTOs versus how strategic should they be?
Yeah, so that's the salient point at the end, right? So anyone in the C-suite, their role is to take the company's goals and take it from whatever the vision and the mission and the goals are, and break that down into tangible structures and processes and prioritization. So almost saying, not just here's what we're going to do because investors or founders have told us to do it, is to also push back and to help people understand why they're making the decisions or the suggestions that they are, as well, to say, actually, yes, we can do that, but first we need to do this, and that's a dependency of that, and we need to bring product or sales or whoever else with it. So it's not just about doing it in silos, it's working with the other exec teams to go, okay, this is not just me making that decision, how do we as a leadership team work on this? What are your dependencies? What do you need to do that? We need this in order to do that, etc., right? And then what you're able to do is then prioritize a plan. And then your role to your technology function is to articulate that and what we're doing and how we're going to, and be inclusive of their perspectives as well throughout that conversation. So for me, that's strategy, right? Turning ideas or goals into tangible plans and action, and being inclusive of actually why we're doing what we're doing and why we are not doing what we're doing, and actually taking people on the journey with you and collaborating with your other peers as well. If it's a case of just going and getting shit done, pardon my language, and just basically building stuff, that's also the role partly of a CTO in an early stage startup. A lot of them are hands-on, but then that's not actually a chief technology officer, right? In what we know to be a scaling business. If you're not able to prioritize those goals and tasks and push back and deprioritize and prioritize, not just once when you're doing the plan, but as things progress in an agile way, then you're not performing the role of a CTO as I understand it to be.
And can I add to that? I agree with everything you said there, actually, and you know, can I give my perspective on it? And then it definitely aligns with yours, but I see the CTO as the bridge between the business and the technology. And the CTO is an enabler, but it's a two-way street. So the CTO will help the business understand what's possible, what is required to make something possible, the implications of something, you know, if something is priority, then it will have delay on whatever, you know, milestones or roadmap, but also to make the business aware of any requirements that come up from technology, you know, any compliance requirements that come up, you know, that need to be done, any tech debt that needs to be managed, et cetera, or resourcing requirements, budgetary requirements. And a CTO needs to be able to communicate with all C-suite members and wear the hats, and, you know, not just CEO, but marketing and sales. So that CTO role, as I said, in a nutshell, I think is a bridge between the business and the technology, and it's a two-way street. That's my
fully agree. The two-way street is really important, because you're a conduit. You're one of my old managers actually said, at the exec team level, your role is to grease the wheels of the organization. Other people kind of tighten the nuts and bolts or replace them, but your job is to make sure the wheels of the organization are greased, and making sure that, as you said, Stuart, just you're connecting the dots, and it's two-way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to just add that over time, roles change in a startup, and that's one of the things that, you know, was important when I was talking about the 10 and 15-year plan, is when you're hiring someone or you partnering with someone, you need to bear in mind that their role in the business is going to change over time. And having the right person for the right time right now is just as important as having that person still be involved and still be as involved and still be really committed, but also competent in 15 years' time. And over time, roles do change. When you talk about this, the 20% people management and 80% technical, that's going to change over time. And if you have 500 engineers, that's going to be almost 100% people management, in 10, 15 years time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just being clear with each other about what the problems that needed to be solved are, as you said, what the role is, because that role will evolve and change. And actually, you might not want to do that aspect of it, in which case you can either move somebody else internally to do that or recruit somebody in or whatever it might look like as well. But yeah, things don't stay the same. Things adapt. And that's where that two-way conversation also progresses, kind of managing each other's expectations as well as kind of your more career wider aspirations. And then that can kind of get in through to that first conversation you said, Mark, like, do you like the beautiful chaos of an early stage startup, or do you want to kind of come in and build something right through for the 10, 15 years? Some people really like just operating in that early stage there. Some people like operating in the next step. Some people, when it's a little bit more mature, some people just like the full ride where possible. So again, just understanding that with people in the initial conversation kind of really helps you understand. Gail, you've got your hand up.
Hi. Sorry, I'm coming from a startup point of view, and what I'm looking at is planning ahead, because I know a lot of money will go into a CTO because you want the best CTO. But in the early stages, what the route I'm taking is obviously getting a fractional CTO. So they're helping me with the business in the early stages. And where I used to work in recruitment, I am very picky about how I pick someone, because they have to be in alignment with the business on what I'm doing. And I have had situations where I've had people in the early stage, they were from the alcohol background, the chap mentioned earlier, but they spent a percentage of the time drinking rather than obviously putting their focus on the business. So I think you just have to be discerning and refining and defining who you're working with in the early stages. And with regards to the technical side, in my head, I've got it that this person's going to take me to this level, but if they're not shifting up the gear to go to the next level, they wouldn't be the right person. So it's about the person who you're working with has to have that mindset of being have expansion in their career pathway, because no matter what you do, you may want to expand, but if they don't have that mindset and capacity to do so, they won't expand with your business. So then that's when you have to switch gear and find someone new.
But it comes down to like managing expectations, because usually that expectation of, hey, I need you to switch gear and you're not showing me you're switching gear, there's been no proactive communication or expectation of setting of what that actually is. Back to what Mark was saying right at the beginning, like what do you see this journey look like? What Stuart and Gaby were saying as well. And that's what you see a lot of relationships break down with, because, hey, you're not doing the thing that in my mind, those unspoken objectives that I want to see you do that I've never mentioned, you're not doing them. Now it's time for us to break apart. And that's not just in work, that's in life. This is how relationships kind of break down, because people aren't able to articulate expectations, and then we're judging them against things that they don't know. And that happens with manager and employee, as well as peer-to-peer and up and down as well in terms of hierarchy.
But I think it also helps that if you in the originator actually has that bigger vision, you have your end goal.
So, and that's mapping out right when you're articulating the role, to say, actually, well, why is there a need? We need somebody to take us from this stage, which is this, through to here, because we don't currently have the internal capacity or the capability to do that. So what would happen without this hire is we wouldn't be able to achieve our goals. Internally, we've brought somebody in here, or we've had somebody consult here, but we're looking for somebody to join us on that ride, right, on that journey as well. In one line, this person's mission is to take us from current stage to IPO, say, for example. What we're expecting your responsibilities are, you're going to be 20% that, 30% that, 50% that, whatever those things are. And this is how you'll contribute. Now that's proactively, people will self-select in or self-select out based on what you're saying, right? To go, actually, do you know what, Gail, I'm here, I can do this part for you. I'm not interested in that, but you'll set out those expectations. When you say, hey, we're looking for a CTO, that means so many different things to so many different people at different stages, as we were discussing briefly earlier as well. So it starts with well, Simon Sinek mentioned earlier, starting with the 5 whys, really drilling down into kind of what you're looking for and why, and then articulating that and using that to have the conversation with people. Again, is recruitment 101.
And Gail, just to give you my view on this, I think it's a great move starting with an interim CTO, because you don't need a full-time CTO, and the implication is that an interim CTO is experienced. They have CTO experience, so they know all of the sort of things around the actual product development, that I mentioned, some of which I mentioned earlier, but there are so many of them, and the processes to help you avoid the pitfalls, when you're actually designing and developing and testing the product. And their role is to meet the business requirements. So you have current business requirements, which change over time, obviously, and that's their role. And you can judge if they're a good communicator, but also when you're ready for a full-time CTO, they will help you write the job spec. That's a very common task for an interim CTO, which you've got an expert to write the job spec for you, which is because the important thing is, in my experience, CEOs, fantastic as they are, they don't know what they don't know, especially in the tech side of things. So how can they effectively interview or even write a job spec for a CTO if they just don't know the details? And I've seen technology people, developers, architects, whatever, CTOs, pull the wool over non-technical people's eyes so many times, both when trying to be recruited, but also during the job itself. And I think that's bordering on criminal, but it happens. So this is a minefield. But you're doing, you've made a good decision, in my opinion.
David, you think you had your hand up? We're going to ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's related to so many things you're saying. Actually, I was in 2 minds whether to come to this, and now I'm like, oh my god, it's the most important thing I need to do. So in my position, I'm a solo founder. I've done the old, had an app idea, developed it via an agency, got it done, it's built, sat an MVP stage, and it's ready to go. And it can deliver on the brand promises that I've set out and defined. What I'm thinking I need, as I said in the chat, is not necessarily the CTO, but a technical lead. And there are 2 questions, and Stuart's comments maybe think of a sort of third. It's, what is that skill set? What's my expectation on a skill set that I can expect from someone who is that technical lead? And then possibly a Stuart for question afterwards is could you sort of, is a technical non-executive director a worthy substitute for the interim CEO that you're describing there? So it's someone with no sort of skin in the game other than just genuinely advising you. And I'm on the NatWest Entrepreneurs Accelerator scheme, and there's a couple of good technical people in there that weren't necessarily experienced in my field of it. So I just thought they seemed so genuine and just wanting to help that it might get around some of the sort of duplicitous stuff you were just describing there. So probably a first question is, what is that skill set I could expect? My assumption, because we talked about greasing the wheels, was that actually these people are going to be technically skilled, probably 2-3 years out of university, tell me if I'm wrong, robust enough in that they're not first jobbers, so they can just get on and develop stuff. They can do it at pace, so they're not someone who ums and ahs about it. They can really deliver. And they've got no problem being the only person in the business. And as I said in the chat there, I was working with a developer who I thought was brilliant. He was brilliant, but his focus was a technical career. There was no development in this room. It's just hustle and get stuff done, right? Like, we're not looking for technical brilliance. We're looking for something that can work for today. In the medium term, that if we design it later, once we've got a load of investment, I'm fine with that. So, and it's just that mindset that I think is probably, I'm just trying to find the balance. And what would your expectation be in hiring that first technical lead in the solo team so far?
Gaby, do you want to take that? We've done a lot of talking so far.
I probably not, because technically I know too little about what a CTO does. I mean, I'm here from a strategic point of view, I guess, and that might not help David enough, because all too often the technology development, the product development is out of sync over time with where the strategy goes, and that is an issue for a lot of organizations in the tech area as well as in other areas. So that's probably more where my skill set lies. So whether you want somebody, you know, 2 or 3 years out of uni, when I work with startups, I probably would look for more experience than that. But, you know, I've referred to people who've actually hired CTOs as such. I've replaced them, but in more mature organizations, you know, big engineering organizations, when, you know, a strategy director, you know, you cannot get the strategy implemented. Therefore, you look for where the essentially the blockers are, or the people who can't move on, or who don't want to move on. That is not your case. You're wanting to get a product off the ground. That's a very different scenario. So I think it's important to articulate what your strategy is, where you're going to go. 2 or 3 years out of uni, I don't know. I refer to you, ZeShaan and Stuart, whether you think that is enough clout to be able to give David what he needs without David knowing perhaps essentially what needs to be done, because he's not an expert in that, but he needs to feel comfortable that for the next 3 years or so, what he does want to achieve is being achieved, and doesn't compromise the launch, the early performance, and the launch of further products and services. Because if you want to go for Series A and B and C, if you falter early on silly things like, I've got the wrong person in place and I blame that person, that will not bode well for David. So that's maybe the contribution I want to make. But whether 2 or 3 years out of university is enough, I personally would possibly doubt it. But, you know, I stand to be corrected here.
Yeah, it comes down to the person's capability as well. I think a good starting point might be to kind of get a list of, go to progression.fyi, right? They have a number of different frameworks from different companies which show their size, their stage, and also what the capability and the competencies that they're looking for from an IC1, individual contributor to level 1, all the way up to a CTO. At which point, David, that might be a good starting point for you to be like, that's what I need for now, right? And so at least your understanding of what you can expect and what the capabilities are, whether that comes with somebody who's 2 or 3 years out of university or 15 years of commercial experience, time is not the indicator of somebody's capability, right? So again, just understanding that, and then to what Gaby said as well, articulating what you're looking for them to do in order to, somebody with at the early stage of their career is going to find it very difficult to take a vision and a mission and then turn it into a technical strategy. But if you've got something that's broken down in the backlog and saying, hey, these are the tasks that need to be done. Hey, I can take that and do it. Hey, I can take that and do it. Hey, this is a block. I need this done. And report back to you as the founder to say, here's the issue. We need to solve that. Again, those are different varying things, but it depends on what problem you need to solve.
I think I'd underestimate the importance of that, actually people understanding, taking objective into the delivery. I've done the product roadmap of the features and need. Ideally, if I had a CTO co-founder, they just take my brand vision on the marketing side and they execute something that delivers it way beyond my expectation. I'd love to have that, I don't. So I've just had to do all the design, the customer journey of it myself, and design it, get it out there, get it done well enough today to get it launched. The people I've tested with it go, oh, it's brilliant, so that's good enough. And then it's going, right, I've been sitting in, Zoom call meetings with back-end, front-end developers, QAs, Jira tickets, daily sprints, I've been doing all that. That's not my background. I'd want someone who can do that and do some coding and accelerate it and make sure the quality is high. That would literally be the remit that I'd want them to take on. And if there's growth in that for them because they've managed a team where they haven't before, does that mean I can hire someone who's a bit more inexperienced? But for me, it'd be, they've just got that mindset. They're like, this is amazing. I get it. I want to build it.
Yeah. The other thing that we've often done is, so you go through an interviewing round. You obviously specify what you think you need. You go through the interviewing round, and then you get to a point where we set them a task, and it's a meaty task. They have to invest hours into that. And it is not to work out exactly what you should be doing in your business, but it's to work out what approach they would take, why and how, and whether that indeed would help you deliver what you would need to deliver, and whether they would fit in the culture, to take Mark's point, etc., etc. But you give them a meaty project to do, which is aligned to what you want to do. But, you know, it would be a little bit unfair to expect them, you know, to give you all the answers, but it should give you some of the approaches, the thinking, and the honesty where they can't fill the gap, where they can fill the gap, but where they could learn. You can tell a lot from somebody in terms of how they approach that. Certainly the person who says, no, I'm not going to do that, you know, that's maybe not the right person. The person who spends too much time on it might not be the right person, but the person who demonstrates that their thinking and approach is solid, that might be somebody to consider. And then, you know, to take ZeShaan's word, is doesn't matter whether they're 3 years out of uni or 6 years. If they can do that, you know, maybe 3 years is not enough because they haven't really had enough time to work through some of those challenges, some of those problems to solve them. But that is often something we've done, and that's worked very well. Yeah. And sometimes we've deployed them in other areas.
I want to add to that, that experience level isn't necessarily something that should be the most important, because over the time period that you have of having the CTO, their role is going to change so much that someone, and to be honest, your first iteration of your product, you're probably going to throw out and start again at some point anyway. So rather have the right person than have someone who, you know, is great on paper.
I was thinking exactly that. That's why, and I mentioned this 3-year number because the developer who was doing it, I was on these calls with him, brilliant, got it done, robust, led the team, articulate, speaking, you know, another language. I was like, this guy's amazing. Look at him, every time he's amazing. But, and he was clearly able, that the ability was there, but he wanted something else. And what I underestimated is the sort of emotional drain on someone's sort of life expectation if they don't have enough years experience. Is this really what they want? Because for him, it wasn't really what he wanted. And I was prepared to offer him, I was prepared to go, look, mate, move in with me to my house. We'll live together and we'll get this done. Like, I think you're great. Clearly, I think you're more great than you think you're great. But he just kind of wilted. And it's that wilting that I can.
As Simon says in the chat, it might be a division of the expectation. Sounds like the best place, Simon says, sounds like the best place to start with is a CTO advisor, someone who can help you as a founder kick the tires of your design, your roadmap, etc. And also potentially somebody who could support and mentor this developer as well. Because imagine being that engineer, you're like, hey, I like what I'm doing, but I don't know what I don't know. I don't think I'm right for that big role. I can do this and I can grow. It might be just managing your expectations and division of your expectations, and go, you find one person to do all of that, great. If not, let me break it down into sections and find different solutions for those as well. But,
I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to end it there because it's 2 o'clock.
David, sorry, very quickly, David, I've connected with you on LinkedIn. I have so much to add to what the guys are saying here. So feel free to connect with me.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I know we didn't get to all the questions, and Kimberly, I'm going to put your question on the Slack London CTOs group. So if there's anyone else that's got questions that did not get answered, I know we probably could have talked for another 3 hours because everyone was brilliant, and there were some really brilliant questions. So if you do have any questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to come over and connect with me on LinkedIn and send me the question there, or head over to the London CTOs Slack group. I'm actually going to go in there and post some questions this afternoon. So if anyone's got some time to come in and have a look and answer the questions and add their opinion, that would be fantastic. But thank you so much, everyone, Gaby, Mark, Stuart and ZeShaan, for all your amazing chat. It was actually brilliant. And as I said, we could have talked for another 3 hours, I think.
Good. Lovely to see you all.
Brilliant. And thanks everyone for joining. Please feel free, as I said, to come and connect on LinkedIn. I can send you a replay of the event if you'd like to have another look. But yeah,
Thanks
thanks
all.
so much.
Go well.
Bye.
Ciao for now.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.